96% of adults are not in the job they dreamt of as a child. Only 4% were successful in making their dream job a reality. There's a negative impact on life satisfaction in early adulthood if people achieve less than they aspired to when they were younger. This is what we learned from 2 recent studies. Does that sound familiar to you? Of course, we can argue that 2 studies don't make a truth. But when we look at the job market, isn't the current mood very much reflective of these findings? So we are destined to be unhappy, going into our careers, maybe not initially, but certainly over time, with a growing sense of failed accomplishment when compared to our younger selves and what we aspire to be. Let this settle and think about it. These 2 studies are not just addressing the topic of job satisfaction. In fact, the stakes are much higher. We're talking life satisfaction. Let me repeat. There's a negative impact on life satisfaction in early adulthood if people achieve less than they aspired to when they were younger. Let's unpack our dilemma. For once, we have to realize that in many ways we are creating these conditions ourselves. In fact, we were trained as children, and we are training our children to think in set outcomes and conventions. Who does not remember here? What do you want to be when you grow up? Let's be very clear about one additional fact. It is easy to blame the boxing in of our aspirations that already occurs during early childhood. The reality, however, is that we have established a culture, an entire society of benchmarking ourselves and others. We are working very, very hard to establish a way in which we want to be accepted, want to be seen, and want to be valued. But we are not really focused on the value we can actually bring, the gifts we carry. And then with these perfected images and made up ideal personal brands, many of us leave their workplaces day in and day out and are dissatisfied or entirely unhappy. Oh, what do? We quit. Sometimes quietly, sometimes in large numbers, as the Great Resignation was presenting to us, but only to realize that we're pretty much the same person wherever we are or wherever we go. If quitting and moving between jobs does not fully address the fundamental problem of unhappiness in our professional lives, and with that, possibly lower life satisfaction, we need to approach this challenge differently. There's good news, however. The research findings did not end there. First, the findings stated a negative impact. We are not doomed or set on an unrecoverable path. Second, the lack of satisfaction is felt early on. In other words, we not only have an ability, but also time to change our limited path, if real or perceived. We have an ability to change limitations set early in our lives to become more fulfilled in what we do and how we do it. Today, we will cover practices we can embrace and tools we can create to challenge and change our circumstances. But it is you and only you that can do the work. Personally, I saw my limitations related to 2 things in my life. I wanted to be less afraid, especially in leading necessary change. And I wanted to be happier, overall, but also when dealing with setbacks. Less afraid and happier. I know, what a cliche, right? And yet I knew deep inside this combination would be my change agent. The real work started when I realized that most issues had to do with me. I was always the common denominator. But I also realized I had influence over outcomes. Full accountability in this respect is so important. Our limitations are never about others. They're all about us, all about you. In fact, this is the only time it should all be about you, but the accountable you. To have a meaningful and joyful work life as an astronaut, doctor, firefighter, pilot, or whatever you dreamt to be early on in life, let's realize that you need to lead yourself on this important journey. Forget the complaining and finger pointing, as only you can do and own this work. This is exactly why there are 96% of dissatisfied careers. And I'm not talking about what is seen on LinkedIn or in social media, but how we feel about them. As I said, there is good news. You have a choice to alter this path. And over time, you will see that as things change, you change. You know, you still may not be in the right job, but you will understand more clearly why your gifts are required in certain places, at certain times, and that other contributions may count more than pay or recognition. You create a new meaning, a new perspective in your job, and ultimately greater life satisfaction. Your gifts, after all, are meant to be given. Here's what I've learned over the years. Elevate others. Be in relationships. Choose happiness. Fear less to become fearless. Elevate others. Be in relationships. And choose happiness with the emphasis on choosing. Morbio Inferior, a beautiful municipality in the canton of Ticino in Switzerland. In this very scenic location, a group of travelers, called the League, falls into a deep crisis of confidence. After having been on a long and adventurous journey together, their League falls apart and the journey ends. It is interesting to note that the League's journey fell apart only after Leo, a rather simple servant to the travelers, disappeared. Those familiar with Leo later describe him as an unaffected man, so pleasing and modest, as someone everyone loved. After Leo's disappearance, the League realizes that there were only individual travelers, each with their own baggage. They lacked a common identity and had no clear destination. It was Leo that brought everyone together, and things were not the same without him. The League soon figures that Leo was far more than a servant. Leo was in fact their leader. Hermann Hesse's 1932 novel Journey to the East became the inspiration for Robert Greenleaf's model on servant leadership. According to Greenleaf, the servant leader is servant first. It begins with a natural feeling that one wants to serve first, as opposed to wanting power, influence, fame, or wealth. Robert Greenleaf was actually an engineer by trade who decided at the mature age of 64 to publish his first essay outlining the concept of servant leadership. Just think of this transformational power and how to outright ignore the 96%, the very category of those failing their dream jobs. In the corporate context, servant leader shares power, is empathetic, puts the needs of employees first, and helps people to develop into their best versions. A servant leader is not determined by hierarchy. All of us can be this leader. Servant leadership is being practiced in some of the top-ranked companies around the world. And it's not surprising. These companies are highly ranked because of their leadership style. One important point that is often misunderstood. Serving does not mean to stay quiet or become a pushover. In reality, what servant leadership demands is to establish a culture of accountability. A servant leader will ask for and offer feedback. A servant leader will create an environment that is safe. This is the only way for leaders and others to grow and to succeed in their corporate mission and in life's journey together. That brings me to our first conclusion. Empower and elevate others by serving them. Become the Leo that was remembered by his fellow travelers, unaffected, pleasing, modest, loved by everyone. Once we have climbed the corporate ladder, served corporate time, so to speak, or become successful, we may conclude certain things are not for us any longer, or that our time of servant leadership has ended. We did our part, right? I have news for you. Servant leadership is a constant and certainly not related to any level of success, status, pay, or title. Servant leadership is a practice you start and you never end. Our egos, however, can become the common enemy to this task. To be clear, ego is an important system, and without it, we could not lead a normal existence. Our ego is constantly negotiating between our instincts and our morals. It balances our desires with moral guidance, solving for the human psyche to be harmonized. And yet, most corporate environments do not lend themselves to this harmonic state, especially with everything being gamified today, approaching our professional lives, caring more about maximizing opportunity, our opportunity, rather than serving others. Being led by our desires, rather than leading to create harmonic states, is what most of us get wrong over the course of their entire careers. The question should never be, what is in for me? But instead, what can I do to help? With an unchecked ego, meaning when we elevate ourselves over others by pursuing our own desires, we will not be able to serve those with us on our journey. Instead, we may actually hinder progress and push others away. There's a lot of talk about corporate culture these days. The moment we allow our urges to soften and elevate those that want to lead and serve, we create safe and productive cultures and workplaces. You don't need free snacks or extra vacation days to do so. As Ryan Holiday in his book, Ego is the Enemy, concluded, ego is the enemy of what you want and of what you have, of mastering a craft, of real creative insight, of working well with others, of building loyalty and support, of longevity, of repeating and retaining your success. That brings us to the second conclusion. To be in healthy relationships with ourselves and with others, serving them and elevating them, we must keep our egos in check. Choose happiness. We first need to understand that our brains are wired in a very specific way. Negative experience will stick to our brain like Velcro. Experiences such as accidents, heartbreak, or fear will carve deeply into the structures of the brain. Positive experiences, however, will slide off like on Teflon. With this in mind, pun intended here, we all have a negativity bias. Let me repeat, we all have a negativity bias. Given this unfavorable condition, we are prone to spending precious mental energy on regrets, resentments, and fears, rather than anticipating and appreciating joyful events. Research, however, has shown that there is a powerful antidote to this negative spiral: practicing gratitude. Practicing gratitude is the quality of being thankful with our readiness to show appreciation and to return kindness. It is important to understand that gratitude is more than thankfulness. There's an act of giving involved. Whereas being thankful is the result of reflection and perspective, gratitude is an active follow-through to show and return kindness. Let me repeat, to show and return kindness. The most stunning aspect of practicing gratitude is that it even works if we decide not to share or return kindness. When we express gratitude, our brains release dopamine and serotonin, the two crucial neurotransmitters responsible for our emotions. They make us feel good. They enhance our mood immediately. They make us feel happy. Gratitude leads to happiness, and never the other way around. If you want to be happy, you have to be grateful first. Well, how do we get there? Start practicing gratitude every morning for 30 days. Think of 3 things that you are grateful for, and it does not have to be complicated. I give you an example. This morning, I was grateful for a nice rainy day. It was cozy. The fact that our daughters were home and that I was able to prepare for this exciting opportunity to be with you. When practicing gratitude daily, our brains quickly start screening the world for everything that is positive, rather than being stuck to our Velcro. Studies have shown we can deliberately cultivate gratitude, meaning reprogramming our brains, and by doing so, can increase our well being and happiness in a lasting way. Okay, now we all are happy servants. Yet in many cases, our workplaces are still a mess. In these days, we suffer from a shortage of authentic, empathetic, and trustworthy leaders. Let's understand what this means. Authentic leaders are known to instill trust. And trust is the very foundation of great cultures and safe workplaces. And then there's a need for empathy as the true superpower in human relationships and with that leadership. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, to walk in someone's shoes, so to speak. This is not a trained response, but genuine care, including the ability to sense what someone needs from you. I'm going to blow your mind now with a quick fix of how to solve for the deep-rooted leadership challenge. We only have to do one thing: practice gratitude. Everything else will fall into place. And here's my simple formula. Gratitude is known to lead to empathy. Empathy makes us more authentic. And authentic leaders are considered to be more trustworthy. How did I jump from gratitude to empathy? Practicing gratitude also creates a heightened awareness of our own emotions, our strength, our values, and with that, a greater understanding and acceptance of others. It brings me to the third conclusion. Set your brain up for success. Practice gratitude on a daily basis and start screening the world for all that is positive. This will empower you to keep your ego in check and come through as a true servant. I've given you practices and tools to consider about the three most important lessons I have learned. And you may note they're all interconnected. One powers the other. But there's one thing we have not talked about: fear. When we fear, we cannot embrace opportunities. We are not fully passionate. We are not able to maximize our potential. Growing up, I was a total geek, more of a loner, living in my own world. My mother thought it would be a good idea for my brother and me to become church musicians, a profession that she thought would never be in crisis. So we were classically trained: piano, flute, voice. But being obsessed by interesting stuff, I discovered that I could turn my classical training into other things. Working a rather unpleasant summer job, I saved enough money and bought my first keyboard. It was during that same time that MIDI, a data interface, was invented, and soon I started recording music on my computer at home. And before I knew it, I had become somewhat of an expert, as I was an early participant in the evolution of electronic music. Over time, I was invited to work on bigger and better things, and was even able to join bands in their rehearsing rooms for recordings and on tours. A few years in, I was offered my first record contract, would play and work in well-known studios, and even spend time in business support of large tours with bands like Genesis and the Rolling Stones, having joined a tour promotion company. To this day, I'm a published artist, having written music, including for German television. But I feared all the time. I would walk a lot, the fields and streets of my hometown, and ponder over all the things that could go wrong. I felt very, very inadequate, as what I did was not a real job. The ones you go to school and earn a degree for? In September of last year, I returned to my hometown in Hannover, Germany. and spent a month in support of my aging parents. To fill the downtime, I walked miles and miles, the same streets that I left nearly 30 years ago. And there it was, a simple but life-changing insight. All the things that I had feared, I mean, all of them without exception, never became a real thing to begin with. I feared over future versions of myself that were not even realized, not even remotely. But all of the crazy stuff I should have been concerned over, well, I didn't even know about. Brings me to our last conclusion. Do not waste your time in fear. Embrace your blueprint. Take risks. Take more than you think. Discover and most importantly, live in the now, rather in some future abstraction of yourself. Fear less to become fearless. We do not have to accept living in conflict with thoughts of what our journeys could or should have been, even if imagined at only young age or at any other point in time. We have an ability and we have time to change. To improve our work cultures, we must improve ourselves first. To achieve fulfilling careers, happy careers, we need to elevate others by serving them, not by asking of what is in for us, but instead by staying focused on what we can do to help others. With our instincts in check, a measured ego will help us to find others as acceptable as we want to be accepted, not only for our strength, but especially for our weaknesses. Only then we can be in relationships with empathy for others and create safe, productive, and meaningful environments. We need to bring forward authentic and servant leadership and instill trust. Being happy is a choice only we can make by learning how to be grateful first. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have been with you today. Thank you.